A simple scheme that uses the confidential, internal, and external classifications can allow an organization to protect sensitive information such as marketing or research data, personal data, customer data, and general internal communications. One of the toughest tasks of information security in general and risk management in particular is information asset evaluation. Before beginning the inventory process, the organization should determine which criteria can best establish the value of the information assets. To assist in the process of assigning values to information assets for risk assessment purposes, you can pose several questions and collect your answers on a worksheet for later analysis. Once the inventory and value assessment are complete, you can prioritize each asset using a straightforward process known as a weighted factor analysis. In this process, each information asset is assigned scores for a set of assigned critical factors. A quick review of this table shows that the customer order via SSL data flow is the most important asset on this worksheet with a weighted score of 100. EDI document set 2, supplier fulfillment advice, is the least critical asset with a score of 41. The realistic threats must be investigated further, while the unimportant threats are set aside. You can begin a threat assessment by answering a few basic questions. Each threat in this table must be examined to assess its potential to endanger the organization. This examination is known as a threat assessment. At the end of the risk identification process, you should have a prioritized list of assets and their vulnerabilities. You should also have that list that prioritizes the threats facing the organization based on the weighted table. These two lists can be combined into a threats and vulnerabilities assets, or TVA, worksheet in preparation for adding vulnerability and control information during risk assessment. Now that you have identified the organization's information assets and its threats and vulnerabilities, you can evaluate the relative risk for each vulnerability. This process is called risk assessment. Risk assessment assigns a risk rating or score to each information asset. For each threat, the organization must determine the expected likelihood of attack, which is typically converted to an annual value. An event with a likelihood of more than once a year obviously has a higher probability of attack. If an organization can determine loss frequency and loss magnitude for an asset, it can then calculate the risks to the asset. For the purpose of relative and simplistic risk determination, risk equals loss frequency times loss magnitude plus an element of uncertainty. Risk control involves three basic steps: selection of control strategies, justification of these strategies to upper management, and the implementation, monitoring, and ongoing assessment of the adopted controls. The final summarized document is the Rank Vulnerability Risk Worksheet. A review of this worksheet shows similarities to the approach used for the weighted factor analysis worksheet. The worksheet shown here is organized as follows. Asset: list each vulnerable asset. Asset relative value: show the results for the asset from the weighted factor analysis worksheet. Vulnerability: list each uncontrolled vulnerability. Some assets might be listed more than once. Loss frequency: estimate the cumulative likelihood that the vulnerability will be successfully exploited by threat. Loss magnitude: Calculate the estimated loss magnitude by multiplying the asset's relative value by the loss frequency. This shows a sample list of worksheets that might be prepared by the information security project team.